Carla Abreu and I'm Community and Program Manager at Singularity University, Portugal, working together with Nova Business School of Economics in this initiative. I have the pleasure to be your host for today's webinar, Being Exponential in Disruptive Times, an initiative that is part of the Role to Play campaign promoted by Nova SPE that aims to help our community to deal with the several challenges in the current context. Most probably everyone has heard the exponential expression in the last weeks related with the coronavirus crisis. But do we all fully understand this concept? And how can we explain the exponential concept in different contexts? This session, these questions will be answered by our host, Manuel Tanger, an entrepreneur that is working with some of the biggest companies in Portugal and also around the world, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. He is our innovation expert and member of Singularity University Portugal faculty. Finally, some technical information to our attendees. Feel free to use your Q&A area available in the bottom of your screen to ask questions that will be answered by Manuel in the end of this session. The chat is mainly for technical issues. And now, to learn more about the topic of this session, I'll leave you with Manuel.
Thank you for that introduction. And yes, we do all have a role to play. But first things first, we're talking about exponentials and disruptive times, and we've heard, like Carlos said, a lot about exponentiality. But what is it that we're talking about? So an exponential function is really something that doubles in value every step that it goes. For example, a function that goes from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and just grows incredibly. Unfortunately, we've had the mishap of learning this in the first hand with this graph, which is basically the evolution of the COVID-19 number of cases. And it's not a full exponential, but it has exponential characteristics. For example, the fact that the first 500,000 cases took 64 days to occur, but the next 500,000 took just 7. And this is mind-boggling for us who think linearly and locally. But the good news is that, yes, the virus is exponential, but it's not the only exponential around. In fact, exponentials have been around for a long time. And the most known one and talked about one, because it's one followed for a long time, is Moore's Law. Now, Moore's Law states that the power of computing has been doubling every 12 to 18 months. This is going on since the 1960s. Now, the computers from the 60s were very basic and couldn't do much of what you think as absolutely the minimum a computer should need to do. But through its doubling capability in a very short time span, we're having these amazing supercomputers at our hand because of Moore's Law and because this doubling capacity of the exponential. So but just let me illustrate this with the ASCII Red, which was a computer released, a supercomputer, the most expensive and fastest computer of the time in 1997, which cost $55 million in the US, and it had 1.3 teraflops. That's 1.3 trillion calculations per second. It was the fastest computer at the time, and it was used by the government to calculate weather predictions, nuclear fallout, serious things, because it had a lot of investment around it, and you needed this amount of supercomputing power. But consider that 9 years later, Sony launched the PlayStation 3 for $499, and it had 0.6 teraflops. So practically half the computing power of that supercomputer was available in your living room for $499. 2020, we're expecting the new PlayStation will have 8 teraflops for the same $499. So we have in our home, in our pockets, in our TV screens, in small devices, supercomputers that were worth millions or billions at the time's value of computing power. This is incredible for the potential it allows us and for the capability to have an enormous impact with the resources that we have at hand. It not only gets super powerful, it gets super small. This is the MicroMote from Michigan University. It's the smallest computer in the world that we know of, and it was released in 2018. And it has, imagine this, it's Wi-Fi, it's solar power, no need for batteries, and it has 7 different sensors. It communicates back and forth information and is very useful. And what you see in white there is a grain of rice. So yeah, it's getting super fast, super complex, and super small. But it's not only computing power, it's also memory. You need to store data, right? This, what you see here, is the first ever memory released in 1956 by IBM, called IBM 350. And it had, imagine this, the capacity of 5 megabytes. That's it. That's a standard photograph. You needed an airplane to carry this massive memory from one place to the other. And this technology as well has followed an exponential curve, an exponentially decreasing curve in size and decreasing in price. So let's look at, for example, what we have now. You know those micro SD tiny discs that we can put on our phone or, well, cameras if you still use them? Well, in 2005, those could hold 128 megabytes for just $100. And 2014, those same $99 were able to hold 128 gigabytes. Nowadays, you buy the same tiny piece of equipment and you can hold 1 terabyte of information for $299. And it's going to drop. It drops so much that if you look at the curve through time, it's very steady, very predictable, exponential, because you look at, it's not a linear graph, it's an exponential chart. And you have to ask yourself, where is this going? What is the end point? And the end point is, of course, zero. It's going to drop to zero. And what are the consequences that it might have? So we've seen power of computation, we've seen storage capacity, and another very useful, especially in these days of confinement, is the internet bandwidth speed. It's been gradually growing at an exponential rate for the last 20 years, 40 years almost, and it's a little bit less fast than Moore's law, so it doubles every 2 years rather than 12 to 18 months. But still, we're entering the age of 5G, where digital information will have speeds that are increasing by the 2 years, doubling in size. Exponentials are everywhere. And not only in these texts that we saw, they're actually more profoundly present in what we have. And this is one of the key insights that the founder of Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil, has in several of his books. And I'll share with you two of them. The first is that the growth of technology and the growth of innovation is actually on an exponential curve as well. And the reason this happens is that innovation is combinatorial. So you have one innovation connected with the second innovation, you create a third. This third you could connect with the fourth. And so it builds on top of each other and at an increasing rate. That's why you have the amount of newness around you that is incredible. A second insight that is extremely interesting is the fact that it's not just the computers and integrated circuits that we see growing. No, everything that is digitized gets on an exponential curve. So once you put a process or a situation or a mode into a digital process of ones and zeros, you get onto an exponential curve and you actually follow the curve rather than linearly. And this, if you think about it and you start extending this and extrapolate what we've had as data till now, it's incredible to think that around 2050, your computer where you're watching this webcast right now will have the amount of computing power that all the brains connected on Earth would have. What would be the result of that? It's an open question, but think about it. So access to technology is much cheaper. So we all have our laptops, our phones, our supercomputers, and it's faster and you can store more and it's going at an exponential rate. It's everywhere. When I mean everywhere, you look at every industry, every technology, every manufacturing process, and it's going, if it's digital, on an exponential curve. Now, I'll take one which is particularly relevant in this phase, which is genomics, right? Because with the COVID, it's very important to track the RNA and the DNA sequencing. But we have to remember that the first ever DNA sequence was done in 1999. It took 9 years. It was the Human Genome Project. And it took $2.7 billion of a multi-state endeavor to do just one sequence. 8 years later, the same sequence of a human took $350,000 to do, which then decreased to $1,000 in 2015. And nowadays, you could do it for $100, the full sequence. This is yet another example of a digitized technology that has decreased in cost exponentially and basically increased throughput exponentially as well. And you can do this through copy machines, if you still have photocopies or you still have printers, sized machines that cost around $20,000, and basically take an hour to sequence a full genome and have the cost of about 100. Interesting fact is that in 2018, on 25th of April, so it's not only our national day, but it's the day of the DNA. The Broad Institute, which is a partnership between Oxford, MIT, and I'll get back to that. They had accomplished 100,000 fully sequenced genomes, 15 years after the first genome was actually completed. So this is an impressive application of exponential technology, and it gets better. It actually, you can actually now buy from Oxford, it's a spin-off from Oxford, the nanopore minion for €900, actually. And it's getting better and better through software, through a telephone-sized machine. You can sequence full genomes, very long, straight genomes, and you just buy it online. You go online, you order it, you can receive it home, and you have a bunch of scientists who are professionally doing this, but also amateur scientists who are discovering an impossible world to reach if you're not in an academy or in a big institution. And you're doing, with this technology, things like this, the phylogenetic profile of the COVID virus, which is very important to track where it's coming. So even at the regional area. So for example, in Portugal, we know we've received or we have the virus for a couple of weeks. We try to track the first one and see the variations that happen in the genome. And this allows us to see where patient 0 came from and to track its evolution. This is critical to discover where it's come from, where it's going, what might be its weak points, and how to develop a cure. Talking about developing a cure, also the time it's been taking to develop a vaccine from once we start and identify a disease has been decreasing a lot through the years. Why? Because of these exponential technologies. And the fact that we're able to do it in 1 to 2 years, hopefully I think 1, that's my guess, for the COVID-19 is a remarkable achievement of science, progress, and exponential technologies. So yet again, the basis of a digital platform allows exponential growth and price performance evolution. So yeah, all these sectors are being affected. We know that exponentials are here. It's having a huge impact everywhere. Yet our brain is really bad at understanding exponentials. I mean, if I ask you, for example, we know that 30 doublings, actually 20 doublings gives you a million. But if I ask you what 10 doublings would give you, I would have to look at it gives you 1,000. But the fact is, this is very counterintuitive, because if I walk 20 meters, I know exactly where I'm going to be, and I know that half of that is 10 meters, so I can relate these distances. Exponentials is very difficult to do. However, tools around us allow us to tap into and leverage exponentiality. And one key thing here is this is true for organizations, be there companies or just groups that want to have a positive impact on the world. And one of the ways to do it is use a framework from Exponential Organization developed by faculty member from Singularity, Salim Ismail, which is called Exponential Organizations. And essentially, it's 10 drivers, 10 attributes that help any organization have a disproportionately large impact. Be it growth, be it impact itself. And this is, we're talking about 10 times larger, not 10%, 10 times. So let's look at this and use this framework to, in these times where you need probably to change your business model, to adapt, to maybe reinvent yourself. It's extremely useful, especially you'll stop thinking linearly and hopefully think exponentially. So here it is, ideas and scale. What does this mean? So I stands for interfaces. So all the interfaces that we have, digital interfaces, like apps, like websites, like digital connections that make an interface between me as a client, you as a company, or whatever the community might be. Super important. Let be it digital. Dashboards. We're having an increase of data and information. We need real-time information to take real-time decisions. Dashboards are fundamental to do it in a timely way. Experimentation, the process that startups have been using for the last 10 years, where systematically testing assumptions and validates what you think is true and quickly get to a solution that scales very fast, it's through experimentation. Autonomy, a new way of organizing teams. Instead of being top-down, you have distributed teams that have their own autonomy, have their own processes, have their own freedom to act. This is very unnatural to us because we're used to top down, but it's incredibly innovative because they tap into a whole bunch of different things that if you have a centralized way of organizing yourself, you can't. Social technologies, meaning all the communication tools that we use. Zoom is an example. We have WhatsApp. We have, you name it. I'm sure you're more familiar than I am with Facebook and so on. These are critical to organize the work in an exponential platform in a way that you're able to scale. So this is ideas. And then you have scale, which starts with staff on demand. If you have a flexible group of people who are experts and know how to work together, but you group them when you need them for projects and products and just as needs occur, you have full flexibility and full control of the quality that you want to deliver. Community and crowd is an extension of the staff on demand. Basically, people who are interested in what you're doing, who want to participate in this effort, who want to help, and who you also want to help. And you create an overarching community and crowd who can tap into. Algorithms and data, fundamental. We've talked about how AI is also increasing exponentially, and so is data and the capacity that brings with it. Leverage assets. So having physical assets that you do not own, but you rent. Nowadays, you can mostly rent anything from spaces, from machines, from operators of these machines. So you can have a variable combination of things that you need for your operations, and you can adapt it like that. That is critical for adapting in fast changing times. Finally, engagement. So these are basically techniques such as reputation systems, gamification, loyalty programs, incentives, prize, to help the community work together, to motivate people and make things happen. So I'm going to show you here a few examples. You can take a screenshot of this because I think it's particularly interesting. And one you've seen in a previous webinar with Philippe Avila, which is Tech for COVID. Now, it's a community that emerges because of a critical need, and it has engineers, scientists, designers, marketeers, and it's always evolving. Basically, they have 28 or actually 27 today because these numbers keep on changing daily. Projects ongoing to support and to help and provide a hand in these trying times due to this massive transformative purpose, which is helping through the COVID situation. And this is allowed because it's an exponential organization. They use a platform, they have the community, they use communication systems, and it's a pure example of an EXO. Another one is Tech for Germany. It existed before, Tech for COVID, and its focus is digitizing the government in Germany, the federal government, and they're started off as a community. Now they're full-fledged, organized, and they're used by the federal government in Germany. Also big initiatives like EU versus virus. There's a huge hackathon happening this week, 24th, 25th, and 26th of April, and you can participate. You don't have to be a techie. You can be a mentor. You can support in different ways, and I invite you to see. And this, again, it's possible because of exponential technologies that we all have access to pretty much for free. But it's not only these huge initiatives. We also have small things like this example, which I collect, and it's an amazing story where a French family in Chamonix has, so the parents, they own a business of fresh fruit and they sell in markets. With COVID, everything was closed down. So these two brothers, Florent and his brother, go for a weekend and set up an exponential organization by using Stripe for payment, Google Docs for organization, Facebook for communication, WhatsApp for dissemination, and basically transform the business. And from one day to the other, actually 2 days, they have 130 orders, and now they're a full-fledged business that is thriving in these trying times. This is incredible. Small businesses transformed through available technologies that we have everywhere. And it's not just out there. It's not just in France. You have it here. I'm sure some of you have received this, and it's interesting to see that cases that were struggling of companies who sold cheese, who sold mutton, who sold vegetables, and they were asking in the only way that they thought was possible, which was through WhatsApp. And in every one of these cases, what happened? The answer was, guys, we've received so many requests that actually we'll have to delay your order because we just overloaded. So for a company, simple company that was having a lot of difficulties, they are now thriving because of a few exponential technologies. The way I like to think about this is like animals who have, and also us, we have our vision mostly conditioned to movement. So when we see a landscape, we note things that move a lot clearer than static ones. And now we're in a phase where everything is moving and everything is actually changing. So we're questioning everything. So we have to take action, and we are taking action. And it's an amazing opportunity for us to take action with the availability of exponential tools that we have. And Singularity University asks this a lot, is if not you, then who? And if not now, right now, then when? Now is a perfect time to act and to change and to be a part of this change. And you are also a perfect person to do it. So my challenge to you and my hope is that, yes, we need to change. These are trying times, but it's a huge opportunity. So think and act big. Go exponential. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Manuel, for your presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us. And now we would like to check just the Q&A if you have some questions so that we can answer to our attendees. Yes, do you think that artificial intelligence is helping companies to be facing this moment in this crisis as an exponential technology?
Absolutely. I love the question. And yeah, clearly artificial intelligence is one of those technologies that is on an exponential curve because of two things, of the increased capacity of computation. And neural networks need a lot of computation, and two, the increased amount of data. So now we have structured, collected amounts of data that, as we speak, are being even more structured and even more useful for these models. So what we have now in artificial intelligence is useful, and it's getting more useful as time goes by. And we see some of the projects in Tech for COVID, for example, they use artificial intelligence in very interesting ways. One of the best ways I saw was in these projects right now that came are ways to predict not only treatment, but spreading of COVID, so we can try to anticipate and react to it.
Okay, so we can conclude that this is also a big opportunity for companies and for individuals to work together.
So one of them is, how do we see large corporate companies are adapting to this new reality? That's interesting. I think we've seen many different types of reaction. The first one was just a closing down, but now we're seeing, even without the reopening, we're seeing a transformation starting to happen. I think many have reacted very quickly in ways of working, and that's going to change dramatically from here on or forward. Because, as we can see, it's possible, and it has some advantages. Look, I have access to all my books when I'm at home. That's something. But I think the reaction now, we can see a lot of movement happening right now that was not present in the first, let's say, couple of weeks. Can you see questions?
Yes, can you check, please?
Okay, there's another one here. How do you think we can grow exponentially on events area in this time? That's a real challenge, and we have the same challenge at Betty, because Betty, we hold also events with startups and big companies, and they tend to be presential. And we've always thought nothing compares to being present and this interaction, and we rely a lot on the emotional process. However, we've already had a first experience of full online, and it went great. And it had actually benefits over the just purely physical interaction, because people were in different time zones, so we were able to adapt to this. We had more content available, but yeah, you really need to rethink it and do not change something that was that's physically interesting into translating directly into what's digital. You have to rethink the event space. You have to rethink the emotional journey that you can supply, and think of all the extra things that happen beyond the screen. So there's a lot of space around us that you can leverage. You can have some merchandising that people can interact together, lots of gizmos that have interesting relationships beyond the screen. Maybe.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question, if we still have it.
Yeah. Let me see. Hello, Antonio. No. Let's see. Last one is: large companies are looking to small exponential organizations and trying to buy them? Question mark. Yes and no. We see everything. We see, yes, this does happen, trying to buy them. But the most interesting is probably not trying to buy them, but trying to work with them. Because if large companies acquire smaller companies, typically there's a mismatch in culture. It's hard for them to keep on being so innovative, the small one, as if they were free to have other clients and learn in the process. So this is actually a very interesting question, because I think very few companies are able to do this successfully. The big fangs, so Apple, Facebook, and so do this very well. Others do it okay, but most probably would benefit from working together rather than just acquiring them, for both their sakes.
So lots of opportunities. Thank you, Manuel, for your presence here at the webinars. Thank you to our attendees that were here present. Thanks to the questions. This webinar of the Role to Play campaign promoted NovSPE, available at www.role2play.novspe.pt, where you can find the recorders of all the sessions. Thank you for being with us. We will see us tomorrow again at 6 p.m. for another amazing webinar with Misha Byrne, also SU Portugal faculty, that will be talking about leadership at distance. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Bye, team.